All right, how's everybody doing on our last day? Doing good, doing good. Getting ready to travel a little bit. I'm gonna try and dodge the virus on our way up to Ohio. Yeah, we're hoping that one of the concerns is that while we're away, they lock down the state again, because then we won't be allowed back in. But from what everybody's saying, no matter how this thing goes, they're not shutting down again. So we'll see how that pans out. Looks like there will be a possible reopening of the campus at a little bit more capacity in August, not in July, but in August. We'll see how that goes. Alrighty, so let's see, we got 10. Hello. We have 10 right now online. It's 3:02, so we'll go ahead and get started with all the talkings. So week 3 has been graded. Saw some really, again, I see some really good stuff, and I see some really bad stuff. For those that are hitting the marks and everything like that, paying attention, I can tell. That's awesome. Keep that up. Even if it's a class you don't like or it's not something that you're into, always give it your all. I always used to say be awesome just because, right? Not because you're going to get a trophy or a good grade or anything, but because you take pride in what you do, and that's the way you live. The wrap up, that's usually released sometime around the end, because they want you to usually they want you to finish the class before you look at the wrap up kind of thing, from what I understand. But I'll double check those dates, because I thought they were set up to release kind of over the weekend and then spill into a little bit of the break. Sorry. So for the other side of that coin, though, I just want to, I don't know if somebody telling you that you need to do better works or makes you resentful or anything like that, but there's some people that just need to step up their game. They need to pay attention. They need to watch all the content, listen to what's being said. If you're looking for you're going to get some classes that are do step 1, then step 2, then step 3, then step 4. And those are great. But in a higher education, getting you ready for work and getting you ready for a job, people don't want to hire you if they have to teach you everything. They want a contributing member of a team. They want someone that's going to come in, be able to work around problems, figure things out, and not go, well, do you have a tutorial for that? Because the art director didn't tell me exactly what they wanted, even though I have pictures and a storyline and all that, but the art director didn't say it, so I didn't know what to do. They don't want that. So if this is something you are serious about, you've got to figure out a way to capture all the information, ask questions when needed, and just find a way to figure things out. This is what you're going to face in the industry, is stuff that you've maybe never done before. I mean, any instructor, any teacher can bring on interns, whether it be online or campus, especially with technology that we have. We can always, if you're like, hey, I really want to model, character modeling is my thing, you might look at the character modeling instructors and ask at the end of your time, say, hey, I would like to intern. And it's 3 months and unpaid, of course, but there are jobs and internships. I would say be careful with internships. You just have to know when to say enough is enough, because a lot of companies do use interns as free labor. And then they're like, well, you got your experience, so use it for what it is. Some of them do offer opportunities at the end, but you'd want to go through your career placement, unless you're talking about on campus. If you're talking about like through the school type internships, then any of your instructors can pull you on as an intern. As far as jobs go, we can still do things like um, a CDA, which is a course director assistant. You know, what I usually have my course director assistants do is run online sessions and man, when I can get them, man Discord, so they're getting in there and answering questions on Discord and stuff like that. So, but yeah, look at the career, not placement, but career advisors, that department. All right. So if you're looking at your grades going, holy smokes, I mean, I don't know how many faces I saw that weren't finished, weren't developed, how many characters didn't have hands, how many characters didn't advance from week 2 to week 3 as far as their clothing, or there was very small advancement. How many props? I think some people thought that the bad examples were examples of what they should do. Some of the props just way too simple, and obviously simple. Some parts were parts of the clothing. And some people took some really hard hits by using parts of their outfit as parts of their outfit and as a prop. And I can't double grade like that. So, you know, hey, people make mistakes. People go down the wrong path. It's what you do at that point. Do you choose to correct them? Do you choose to learn from that and not make those mistakes before? Ask more questions, watch more content. I don't know. But, you know, ball's in your court. And, you know, do the best you can, and if that is your best, then that's your best, and that's what it is. You know, at a point, it is what it is, kind of deal. So I have a question about the hair breakdown. Let's see. So should I look for real life reference that is close to the hair for my character, or is it okay to use the turnaround sheet from the reference? Great question. We're actually going to be talking about hair. I had 2 students. Awesome. They shared their work with me, and hopefully they don't mind. I'm going to use it today because it is good material to talk about. And, you know, some things are going in a really good direction. Some things need a little bit of steering. But, you know, I love using content like that because I think it means more to you all when I show that. But part of that's going to be about hair. No matter what it is you're doing, real world reference is always a good idea. I know on the online it says find real world reference. A lot of that is because what you're seeing in your reference is line work, and it doesn't show you depth. It doesn't show you highlights and shadowing. It doesn't really even show you the clumping or collecting of the hair. So real world reference that is close to that hairstyle is something you should be shooting for. And it might take a little bit of finessing and finagling to find something that works. And if not, you might do kind of like a prop breakdown / hair breakdown, you know, for your own usage. And in that case, you could use the what is on the actual sheet, what is on your character sheets, you know, anything like that will work out okay. Give me just a second. I might have to step away for a second. Somebody just came to the door, and I need to answer their questions. My apologies. This was supposed to be done earlier, but give me about 5 minutes. And don't worry, we'll go longer if needed. So. Hey, sorry about that. It always tends, you know, they're supposed to come before, and I was like, you watch, they'll come as soon as I start my lecture, and that's what happened. So let's see. I already did my character's hair from the sheet. Do I have to redo it? Are you talking about for the hair breakdown? No, I mean, it's an integrated, I mean, there should be enough information there to work with. It does state to find real world reference, but you know, again, since it's an integrated, and if you did the correct drawings, right, the breakdown of the parts and then the directional, you know, pretty sure you're gonna be okay, right? I wouldn't worry about that. But when you're working, I would definitely push for having some real world reference, because again, a lot of that line work just doesn't give you enough information to properly create good looking hair, right? It ends up looking like a block in, like, you know, and it just doesn't have that high level that we'd be looking for. Okay. Now, also, I did want to point out today that I'm not going to be talking about getting your submissions ready. And you might be like, why not? That sounds terrible that you won't be talking about that. The reason I'm not talking about that is because I made a video. That is the wrong one. I keep bringing up the wrong one. There we go. At the week 4 deliverables, you'll see I made an hour and 10-minute video that is at the bottom. And that is going to show you how to get your submission ready for submission, how to get your assets ready for submission. Okay. So you follow that. I go through the entire process of decimating the character, looking for ways of bringing down the poly count to the right poly count, importing and positioning, you know, deleting history, optimizing your scene, resourcing your normal map, and then going from, you know, to submission, you know. So it covers everything. That'll walk you through that process. That is down in the reading and resources. Is our work due Monday again, or is it Sunday this week? It should be Monday. And I've been having a problem with it changing the dates. Yeah, class wrap up will open the 28th through the 1st. This should be Monday. So, and I know that's through your break, but again, the options are to not give you a break, right, and push through, and that never works out well. I want you guys to be able to unwind for a little bit. And then in other cases, a lot of staff move their deadlines to like today, right? So all your stuff would be due today instead of through the weekend because they didn't want to impede on your break. So as I mentioned earlier, it's good to get your stuff done and ready as soon as you can, but you have that extra time, right? If you don't want it to affect your break at all, then it needs to be ready to go by whenever break starts. But you do have until Monday at 11:59 to dot your I's, cross your T's, and get everything in. And then that gives you Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to enjoy. Okay. All right. So remember, all your information is at the bottom of the page of the week 4 deliverables. Okay. Week 4 deliverables, bottom of the page, reading and resources, how to get your stuff ready for submission. That is a newly added video. If you have any problems with it, as far as it playing or anything, please let me know. I know I'll be on the road and whatnot, but again, with technology and our phones, I can check emails on my phone. I can respond. I can even look at FSO. You know, I remember one time I forgot. I was like, oh, I need to push all this stuff. And I was like, wait, I've got FSO on my phone. It works really good. I'll go ahead and do that. So we've got that there. So today we can talk about hair, and we have this nice resurfacing thing to look at, which will get us into some resurfacing troubleshooting and fixing, and then looking at hair and how to get hair pieces created. I'll probably just use that scene and go from there. Any other questions? Oh yeah, one other thing. I don't know where the confusion came from, but I saw a good amount, a lot of people um, submitting 2 assets in week 3, 2 character assets in week 3. I don't know where that confusion came in. I only graded 1 because that's all we were required. I don't know if people were thinking extra credit or anything like that, but if there's confusion anywhere in verbiage or anything like that, please, please, please let me know, because I want to make sure I get that corrected. But this is the first month I've seen that, the amount. There was quite a few. I don't know if people are talking to each other and spreading the wrong info or whatever, kind of like that telephone game, but you know. Want to make sure we spend our time where we need it to be spent. Ooh, I did. There was. Let me. I have to see if I can find it. Let me pull it off screen here real quick just to make sure I can find it. Let's see. Week campus. Week 3. Laura, just wanted to say thank you. I think I wrote in your comments, thank you. Really nice, strong submission, great looking asset. If I had to give advice, I would say you got the tight tension wrinkles in play, but I think some of your volumetric stuff, your structural stuff can be fixed up. Not sure if you're with us today, but I don't think so, but really nice. Props are strong. You know, you zoom in on this thing and there's a lot of details in there, a lot of little things added, very nice and clean, separate pieces. Was very happy with that. There was another one. I have to see if I can find this one. I think it's this one. Yes, this was another one that I was really, probably one of the best set of straps I've seen done on a character. You know, a little stitching and things like that. I like the folding of the straps. A lot of people don't do that. They'll try and just take the stuff and just kind of sculpt out that overlap. So I like that that was put in there. And some simple things. I like some of the fakes, you know, here's just a simple piece put in there. And it was put in, and then I don't even think it's 100% accurate of a piece. I think it's just a simple piece to make it the illusion that there's like a tension thing or something like that. So that was really neat. And then, you know, a decent dagger, nice clean emblems. And what makes this, you know, an asset like this stand out is the different pieces. Again, I saw so many people trying to rely on sculpting everything out of one piece or not using enough pieces, right? So I could tell that's a different piece based on its coloring. Okay, and from a distance, it reads really nice. It didn't really match the reference all that well, but other than that, it's, you know, it's pretty cool. I like the little snake on there. That's pretty neat. But pretty cool. And I've got a couple more like that. I think this month the ones that are hitting those high marks, I'm going to have some good material for some new example images. So thank you for that. You know, and don't worry, we don't use it for anything other than check this out, and we put it in on FSO and stuff like that. So, but cool. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I showed those. All right, so let's get into, we'll do since we're talking about resurfacing the other day, we'll look at resurfacing. I know that David, I believe, was asking about characters, doing a whole character. I wanted to bring up a scene for that. So this was sent to me today, this morning, and you know, it's not bad. It's got some nice organization, but there are some things that I want to point out, and this would be things that, as I'm looking at it, I'm evaluating, and I'll share with you the criteria I use to evaluate. So I use those 4 things that I talked about the other day. First one, shape. Is the geometry being created? Is it good to hold the shape? And yes, this is. Okay, they have loops around the mouth, right? Those are teeth. They have loops holding a lot of the shapes. And when you see these things next to each other, they look pretty close, the high res to the low res. Okay, so that's what we're looking for, right? I don't see a lot of the model sticking through, right? It is sitting on top nicely. We have the low res version over here as well. And I can see that the model is doing its job holding the shapes, right? So good. The next thing is density parameterization. And these aren't really in order. They're just what I use, right? And it's the stuff I mentioned while I was building geometry. So density and parameterization, I'm going to look through the model and see dense areas around the eye, and then look around it and see, do these blend well? When we look over here, then we look over here, is there a problem? And because of this spacing, are we seeing a parameterization issue in some of these areas? So like right here, this is a parameterization issue. We're starting to stretch our topology. And the result, or not the result, but one of the causes of this is density. I think we've got some looping things up here that can be changed, and that'll help out some of these other issues that I'm noticing. Okay, so density and parameterization, always looking for that. The next thing that we're talking about is edge looping and edge flow. Okay, so edge looping, are we using loops, edge loops to encircle, encompass? Are we flowing the edges properly? Are they erratic, right? And they usually become erratic when we don't have enough geometry, right? So in here, we see a little bit of erraticness. Across here, we're seeing it start to get erratic. Across here, it's erratic. And this might be stuff that the artist already knows. No big deal. It's just worth mentioning for everybody else. Let's see. The other thing I would say about edge looping, we've got some nice edge looping patterns, but then we have some broken edge looping patterns, right? So if I follow this edge up, it goes up around the eye and then sweeps up and around. I think this can be created a little cleaner. Maybe we can do, if you remember in MCR, do you remember them talking about edge ring modeling? Right, where everything kind of had a tracing edge around it. So if you're going to go over this area, right, you're trying to hold that, you would have an edge loop just up to the outside of all of your shapes. So I see this kind of coming into play. Oh, I guess my computer started again. Right, but what I would do, and what helps out on a lot of these models, and this helps with ears and muzzles and things like that, but I would bring another loop just to the outside. And anybody that's looking to model a car, this is a great way to buffer your geometry so you're not getting pinches and pulls in weird ways. So I would have this edge loop come out just a little bit further, and that's going to help alleviate some of this erraticness and these kiting polygons, because it'll take that loop out further, again, relaxing the topology. And we'll look at that. We'll look at how to do that, how to successfully add that and implement those types of things. Okay, so that's going to be something I'm looking for. And then the last one here is, and I don't know if I mentioned this one, but this is just kind of a standard thing that you should be looking for when you're looking at geometry. And it's, do I have good geometry? I'm not talking about topology. I'm not talking about the organization of your topology. I'm talking about your geometry. Okay, so this is when we look for things like non-manifold, unmerged verts where they shouldn't be, T-junctions, heavy star junctions, overuse of junctions or overcomplicated topology. Anything that you've learned up to this point about what makes geometry good, n-gons, too many triangles, you know, that kind of stuff. This all goes into this, lumps up into this category. So most of it you're already aware of, and you know how to search for it, mesh, cleanup, and you check for those things. And when you're using the quad draw, chances are you're not going to make any weird geometry like that. But what you will make is overcomplicated geometry. So when we look over here and I start looking at areas around the topology, I look at junctions and I say, why is that junction there? Why is this junction here? Why is this junction here? And sometimes it's an easy answer. Oh, okay, it's here because of this, or it's here because of that. But when I see this junction and then the geometry turning and then some other things that are going on within a small area, I begin to question, is it the best layout? Could we have simplified that kind of stuff? What you will look for on your models are if on the side of your cheek, you have all these diamond junction, or you have a diamond junction with a box junction next to a star junction, ask yourself why. Why is that topology there? And if you can't come up with a reason other than I didn't know what to do, that's not a good reason. Usually we can simplify that topology. And you have to think, if we're doing this stuff now, we might be doing this stuff on the rest of the body, which then for animation will cause some issues. So these are things we're going to look at. We're going to look at this model and we're going to fix up some of these areas and hopefully produce a slightly better asset. It's a pretty decent layout. This character has a lot of shape change. This is a very complex structure compared to most people are doing a character that's got a nose, 2 eyes, and a mouth, right? Not a lot of complexity going on there. But this thing here has a lot of shape change, a lot of things we need to look at. You know, the artist asked, is it too heavy, right? Well, a normal face is going to fit within right about here. This asset has a lot of extra stuff. A lot of extra stuff being brought into play, which means it's naturally going to be a heavier asset. So you always have to take that into consideration, right? I had mentioned 1,500 to 2,000 as a ballpark, and that was for standard human heads, okay? Once you get into something like this that has a muzzle and horns and this big flap thing, you're going to be higher. It's just naturally going to be higher. So let's take a look at where we're at and see what we can do. And I'll talk about some of the specifics that they had asked, and then we'll look at some of these other things. So the first thing that they had asked was, when I mirror this over, I get a star junction. And this is very common, but we don't want it. Okay, so I'm glad that they noticed it, and we don't want it. And how do we get rid of this? Well, you can't look just here, okay? You have to, and the first thing I did was I went like this, and I looked at the model, and I said, what's missing? And one thing you'll start noticing is one issue bleeds into another issue. So if we have a star junction, which is bad geometry, a heavy one, especially at the center point, why? Well, look above it. Would you agree that this is a density parameterization issue? Look at the geometry here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then from here to here, we have none. So within the same amount of space, we have 4 edges here. And from here to here, we have no edges running in between there. That gives me an avenue for correction. So how are we going to fix that? Let's yeah. Apparently, I wanted to go to UVs, which I didn't, but we're going to go into here. I'm going to go ahead and launch the Quadra tool. Okay. And if you're unsure of what you're going to want to do here, simplification, more uniform topology. So here's what's going on. The radial pattern for the loop around the eye is coming too far out. Okay. So if I were to sketch on this, okay, I'm going to want my star junction somewhere right about here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is that's going to break this free, and I'm going to be able to do something like that. And I might need to add an extra edge. Whenever you're trying to pull down a star junction, you're trying to pull some of the legs off of the star junction, it will result in either deleting quite a bit of geometry or adding geometry. Okay, so this is more what I'm looking for. This will give me, I always like to have a buffer. So what I mean by that is I've got my center line or anything that I want to separate shape. Right? This happens a lot in the abdominals. When people try and loop through the abdominal region, they'll share an edge from one abdominal to the next. So if I shape the one abdominal, it's going to pull the shape of the lower abdominal or the one above it or below it. So I always like to have the separating line and then an edge just to the left and right of that, or top and bottom of that. So now I don't touch this one. I adjust these. If I want independent control over what's over here, I don't shape beyond this one. And if I want independent control over here, I don't shape beyond this one, right? So a little bit of idea behind why this is going to happen that way. So the easiest thing I would suggest doing in a case like this is cleaning it up. Gutting it is usually what I say. Some people don't like that term, but gutting it just means I'm going to go in here and going to move some stuff around. Okay. And then this is going to be more so allowing me to see it without the confusion of the mess. Okay. So we have that. Now we're going to start going across. So we've got 1, 2, 3. You can see that push the star junction down. It's not where I'd originally said, but it's in the ballpark. And then we have something that needs a home, right? Where are we going to take that? Well, we have room for it. Perfect. We have room for it. So now we're going to solve this little bit of density problem by adding an extra edge. And that's going to help us simplify this area. And now 2 birds with 1 stone per se. Okay, so now we're going to go through and I'm going to hit the B key. I'm going to make my smoothing a little bit greater. I'm going to hold shift, right? And I'm just going to kind of space out some of that topology. And remember, if you can't get the center here to space out, you need to kind of pull that geometry manually, space it out, and then go back into the relax. And there's plenty of geometry here to hold some of these larger shapes. So now we're getting rid of some erratic edge flow. Look at that right there. This is called banding. When you can see a line that looks like a band or a strip or a strap of geometry, that'll cause the geometry to pinch there, and it'll create a kind of like a streak through your model. This is again where that density parameterization comes into play. We've got to space that out. Okay, now we have the same problem down here, right? But we know how to fix it. And awesome, I know that when I add this edge, it's not going to shoot through the teeth and into the bottom jaw where we don't have a problem. We don't have a problem at the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and fix it. And we're going to look at that little bugger there because I don't think we're going to need it. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Shift control. Clean up the faces. Move some stuff. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and drop in an extra edge. I've already gone and looked to make sure that I'm not going to be hurting anything by doing so. Targeting, stay on target. Okay, now we've gotten rid of that. And a lot of, everybody that's got your geometry, this is stuff I want you to be looking for, are these types of issues. There we go. Now, I am moving some geometry. I can tell that some of this is holding geometry. If you start doing stuff like this, you got to remember to go back and, because I always said geometry has a job. You got to make sure that geometry is doing its job still. Because as I start to smooth through, I'm actually pulling some of the geometry away from where it was intended to be. So in that case, to bring it up, I might say, I'm going to need to add an extra one that'll help me relax and still hold the shapes. Okay, but now density and parameterization is going to take another play here. And you can see that we've got some geometry that is being terminated But as a result of it being terminated, we're also seeing some areas down here that don't have enough topology. And we're getting a little bit wonky down there. I think we can simplify that a little bit. And I don't think I'm going to have time to clean up everything. So what we'll do is I'll work my way through this zone into the beak and see what we can do with it. And then hopefully that'll give people some, I do want to come up here to talk about the edge ring stuff, but through what I do here might give options and opportunity for the rest of the model and for anything that anybody else is looking at. Okay. So I'm slowly working my way down here. So when I'm looking to get rid of geometry, I'm looking at all my options. And I don't think I need to get rid of geometry. I think we're going to need to add. This right here is setting the tone for the rest of the model as far as density. If I want to change that tone, then I'm going to look at maybe getting rid of an edge here, just so we're not too crazy. And let me show you what I like to. I don't like using just deleting sometimes. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the quad draw tool. I'm going to go to object mode. It's not all about the quad draw. I know it thinks that it is the end all be all tool for everything, but it's not always about the quad draw. Okay. I think we've got something underneath that. That is the new one. And what is that? That is the old one. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on a layer so we can look at just the new one that we're working on. Okay. But in some cases, what I like to do is I'll use an edge ring. And this is why edge looping is so important. Okay. So I can grab this and grab the edge ring. Okay. Or whatever one I need to grab, right? So let's say it's that one. Okay. And I just use my arrow keys to change between edge loop to edge ring. And I can use this to kind of bounce between the model, right? Kind of see how my edge loops are flowing. Called pick walking, if you've not heard that term before. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I just use collapse. Collapse is my favorite tool to use. Merge collapse, collapse edge. And what that does is it gets the geometry to meet in the middle. So I don't have to delete and then move everything. I just delete, and you can see that it kind of spaced it out for me. And that feels a little better. It doesn't feel as tight with extra geometry. Okay, so now we just go back in, we bring the high res up. I definitely need to delete some history. Okay, and then we're gonna go and lock it down again. Okay, now, this is gonna be a little complicated, I'm not gonna lie. I'm looking for solutions through here. There's a lot of changing a direction, and that's okay. Have an idea of where you wanna go before you start maneuvering. Okay, so my eyes are taking me to a couple places. One is the spacing here and the spacing here. Also that edge ring modeling, you'll see how far the loop goes around that horn, which is great. I like how far that's going around, but this around the nostril is really tight and compact. And then we have kind of a broken edge ring there. I'm also trying to look for passageways to send geometry. So I'm looking down here through the beak, and I'm looking over the horn because it looks like we can push a little bit more through here and not affect anything. Kill zone that should be gotten rid of or should be made. We're going to go ahead and open this up because I might need to throw some geometry into the nostril here. And kind of fix that up there a little bit. All right, so now what do we want to do here? I like to pop some holes there. This allows me to go in and add an edge. And then you know, I got to move stuff around. I'm always moving stuff around, kind of taking a look at direction. Okay, so I'm looking at pathways. And if you remember the other day, I did a thing called trading edges. It might be better to reconnect one of these here. And that'll allow me to simplify a little bit. And that way I only have to throw in one, but let's see where that one's going. I always have to know where these things are going. That's not terrible because the beak could use a little bit more. I'm going to send it that way, knowing that it might be temporary. And then I'm going to relax. You see, it's simplified. Yes. Yes. So the question is, why do we have to resurface our model? Until the industry switches to, we can use 5 million polygons per character, or even at some of these models, when you get all the gear and everything, they're 50 million polygons, right? Until that happens, what comes out of ZBrush is unusable topology, right? It just looks pretty, it's cool, but when you go to deform it, it's just, and really as a model, it's not too taxing on a system, but once you start throwing a rig and you start trying to move it, oh man, there's nothing more painful than having a model that chugs because it's too dense or there's too much going on. And every time you try and hit a pose, you move it and it goes, that's your fans picking up, and then it moves, right? So you almost have like a 15-second delay every time you want to move a joint. So it's in the name of efficiency and usability. That's a good question. You know, don't be afraid to ask why. Why do we do certain things? Now, there's another thing here. I'm gonna look down here. You see this? Okay, this is unnecessary. It stops the geometry, and now that we have a kill zone in the nose, I'm gonna go ahead and make some room here. And you see how as I start to adjust the topology to fit, right? Let me show you. Look at that. Okay, you might be thinking, but Mr. Scarcella, what about this line going up there? Yeah, that's something I got to think about. All right, and I might choose to put it up there. And it's more simplified, it's more uniform. And hopefully you can see with all of this shape change, this model is going to be heavier than most. Look at that. Look at how nice that geometry starts to be able to relax. And hopefully you can now see why it's so important to have that kill zone. Also, let's talk about another benefit. Another benefit to doing what I just did is that I can delete a clean edge, a nice edge throughout the whole setup versus trying to delete an edge that goes multiple directions, if that makes sense. And hopefully when everybody gets into rigging class, you'll understand more so why topology becomes so important, just to have clean stuff. right? I can go back and resituate my edges and make sure that we're on point. Okay, so it's looking better. I'm going to sweep through this area here, kind of relaxing some of that geometry, putting it back where it needs to go. And let's simplify a little bit. Get rid of that B key. Sometimes for something simple like that, yeah, go ahead and just my B key is sticking again. There we go. You can just delete, you don't have to get into the whole switching and using. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and close that right there, and then try and figure out where all this other stuff is going to go. You can see why having erratic edge flow, it takes away your ability to possibly see a solution. Okay. Now, I'm going to have to do a little bit of prep work down here. When I'm looking at structures, I am trying to look at their shapes. If I were to build this, if I'm trying to build this as a, out of like basic shapes, right? I should say. This area here will have this, more of this type of layout. Okay, more like a cone or a cylinder, okay, with of course an end, which we would figure out. But right now we have multiple directions going on. And I think if we can transition it to more of this vertical horizontal layout, I think we'll be able to simplify and get rid of these junctions, the necessity for some of those junctions. I don't know if it'll work. All we can do is try it. Okay, so what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to find where we're going to start it. I'm going to start prepping that area, taking away all the direction change. And we might, because I really don't want to go completely across this, but I might need to. Because I like the way the geometry is coming through this way. Let's see what we can do here. Okay. Also, we're going to have an extra one coming through, which is going to help out. So we're going to be able to get kind of to where I was looking to go, but I think we're also going to need to do kind of a hybrid crossover loop. Okay, so let's see here. Oh yeah, and this is very much like a puzzle, as somebody had mentioned. Okay, now, hopefully you can see the issue that we're running into, right? As I close this in, I start noticing that we have only 2 points of connection, 2 edges, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 points down here at the bottom. So instantly I zoom out and I look. Do we see any other places that we can use a little bit more geometry? Right? One of the reasons that we needed to identify these points early on was so we can keep them in our mind and go, I need to add more geometry. Can I send it into those areas that needed more geometry? And I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and add, I think we have 1, 2, we need 2 more edges. We're going to send them through. Now, I don't want to just go like this and just throw that through. I would rather it go here. So I might have to move some geometry around so I can send it through a better pathway, probably right through here. Let me see. Yep. That's just going to be a little cleaner and not impede on our other directions there. And I'm going to do, let me do some housekeeping before I get into that. I'm just going to move some of these down so I get a better idea of where they should go. Actually, I think what we're going to do here is open that up, drop in our next one. I know I'm doing a little bit of extra stuff here. And then I'll figure that one out. I think that one's going to end up connecting somewhere down here. But let's go ahead and make the connection. Okay. And then I'm going to use the nostril hole for a kill zone. That's one of the reasons we wanted to keep that open. It allows me just to drop that geometry right in pretty quick. And then we're going to go ahead and smooth it all out, making sure that we're taking care of our edge flow and making sure nothing's erratic. So you almost see how we're creating zones, right? We got zones that are starting to appear. And when we don't use clean edge looping or geometry in between the zones, we start to lose kind of where those zones exist. But also, you're starting to see that the geometry is beginning to feel like it's part of. You see the gradient change between the zones. It's not an abrupt band, nothing band, right? So we're kind of moving through gradually changing densities. That's usually a better thing to do for hard surface. Not hard surface, but you know what I mean. The good old organic structures. And there we go. That's what the need was for that little opening. I knew there was an extra one that I was forgetting. No. Again, remember, we can always nudge that geometry back, right? Geometry has a job. We want to make sure it's still doing it. But I think there's plenty on here to hold these shapes, especially when you add a normal map into that. It's really gonna, I think it's gonna hold well. Okay, we're going to switch. Come on. There we go. Okay. Now, what I was talking about with edge ring, again, the last thing I want to cover, and then we'll get into some hair step. Well, I want to bring up a model so we can talk a little bit about some of their stuff there. But when you're swooping around, right, things like this is a broken loop. I don't know if you can see it right here where it's turning inward. I would run these all out and through the forehead and then connect, run yourself a loop around. All the loops that I'm putting on these objects stem beyond the shape. Okay, so what that looks like here, I'll go ahead and do it here, is there, here, and then I'm going to tie into this one. Okay, but you see that, how I outline my shape. And sometimes you get a simple fix like that, and sometimes you go, ugh, what am I going to do with this? But look at the direction here. Again, what's happening is we're changing direction multiple ways. I would look for more of a vertical, kind of like what's happening here, a little more vertical, horizontal direction there. And if you don't know where to take it, you don't have solutions, you got to look for ways of and pathways to flow topology. And we look and go, ooh, that's not nice. I don't like that. But up here, we got plenty of space for geometry. Let's go ahead and see if we can put an extra one up there. Connect. No, it's not my favorite, but for right now, I think it's going to work out okay, spacing out that geometry. And then even for edges like this, it's going to usually be better to tie in some sort of a edge ring that traces that shape. Okay. So hopefully that helps everybody out with ways of looking at and evaluating your topology. Topology is very important. As modelers, we like to show our geometry off just to show that we understand it. It also helps us show that we can look at automated topology softwares and things like Z-Remesher and say, oop, that did a good job, it did a bad job. Or where do I need to fix it? Where do I not need to fix it? But this one is challenging. Oh, man. That's got a lot more. Anybody that's doing just regular head, you know, and sometimes it's that way, you know, it's just the asset you pick. The asset you pick offers a whole variety of things you need to watch out for. And somebody else picks an asset that still has its own challenges. They're different challenges, but in some of the other areas that you're having problems with, they're not going to have problems with. So that's where I'd go. Any other questions about what you've seen me do so far? We would then remirror it, making sure that we center up our center line. And if anybody really wants to get into geometry, this is an offer I make usually every month. I've got my first human model I ever made back in 2003. It was a much different time back in 2003. And the needs of geometry were much different. High resolution was 10,000 polygons, right? So we had to loop and edge loop in specific ways to get shapes, because one of the things we learned about polygons was what you see is what you get. You had to use subdivisions or a smooth proxy to get a high resolution look at render time. So you were doing all kinds of crazy stuff with topology. So what I offer is, if anybody wants, I will send you that model, not to use it, and don't make fun of it. I mean, it was in my adolescent awkwardness that I created it. And the geometry is just a nightmare. So what you do is you use regular modeling tools, the multi-cut, delete edge, collapse, and you work through it, creating more of an industry-ready topology for today. And through doing that and managing that asset and working through it, you just get so much information on being able to spot bad geometry, evaluate why it's bad, and then how to fix it. I think it's fun. Like you said, it's like a puzzle. Some people enjoy puzzles. I do sometimes. But geometry-wise, yeah, I really like it. You want? All right, yeah, definitely email me, and I will send you the. I'll send you the model. You know, again, it's old school topology. It is a nightmare. It is a mess. So cool. I mean, that's it, and you can see the difference, right? We'll go ahead and compare. And this is what is there already is decent. We're just doing another pass, right? We've got pass 1 and pass 2. So we'll go ahead and move this off to the side. Let's unlock down that geometry. Soft select out. Of course, yes, definitely needed you to select down there. And we're locked up a little bit. There we go. We are unlocked. Maybe it'll read right. There we go. Okay, so now looking at the differences in the topologies and using those ideas of good topology, you'll see the difference. More simplified, uniform layouts. And I think we actually added quite a bit of extra geometry. Now we're at 2,400 for the one side, and we're not even done with it yet. So we'll probably be at about 2,600 when we're done. So that's a 5,000 polygon head. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's switch gears and start looking at some hair after I keep forgetting, but I want to bring up, and just talk quickly about some things when we're looking at, I think he's in here. Jersey, resurface test. I want to say it's this one. And so you will have the recording for that. And thank you for sharing that stuff with me, because it's on the right pathway. Iteration 1, get it done. Now you go through and you evaluate and you say, where can I make corrections? And we looked at some things. As far as big ticket corrections, things I would want to see, what would be on my priority list is cleaning up that center line, get rid of those things, and then smoothing through your mesh to adjust the density parameterization in some of the areas. But, you know, getting through and going into correcting all that could take a little bit of time. But you got the video, follow that. Once I'll try and get it up as soon as I can. Last night, or not Wednesday, I forget what day it is. Wednesday's lecture took a little bit for it to process before I can actually post that. So that is up now. But this one will go up hopefully as usual by the end of this evening. Okay. Okay, so this guy is being full body. Remember, you're not doing the full body. You're not gunning it. You're just doing the head. but he's about to the point where he needs to be fully resurfaced. So I am doing it in zones. I will hide his high res and we can kind of see. There's his head resurfaced. I didn't put ocular cavities in or a mouth cavity yet. This is another thing that we are going to start thinking about at this point in time as we switch from, because trying to sculpt a mouth cavity, unless you model the mouth completely open, trying to do a mouth cavity is difficult. So I do, but again, I spend most of my time instructing and doing demonstrations. So some of the stuff in there you've seen through the demonstrations. I think the other day I got a hair and I was like, hey, I'm going to do some work. And then I worked a little bit on this guy and then called it a day. But yes, I do have one. The whole instructor thing, I miss the days when I was a student and constantly working, or when I was in labs and just constantly producing. It is a much different time, but yes, definitely on there. And maybe it'll encourage me. Maybe it'll encourage me to spend more time on that stuff. But let's look at this. So we've got the body going. Now, the reason I'm doing it in sections is because I'm not sure where I want to go with each piece. So it's easier, smaller, more manageable regions, right? That's always the name of the game. Smaller, more manageable regions. So I do the hand. I start looking at how I'm going to figure out the hand to the arm. The body's pretty standard. And then the foot is a replication of the hand. So that one's already been kind of taken care of. But the big thing that I'm looking for, and as you'll notice on here, is I do have some specific loops. I'm using a cape loop. Cape loop is one of my standards that I like to run with. It's not mine. I didn't create it. I didn't make it up, but a cape loop is this loop here, splitting up and around the back, and you'll see it either go across the back or down the back. I have put this junction in. Sometimes it's a test. You know, as a modeler, I might, not might, but there'll be a lot of times I'll test bind some things. If I'm not sure about the geometry, I'm going to test bind. And this right here, this kind of expansion allows the elbow to kind of hold its shape a little bit more. So I might do something like that there. And then depending on how much I need, I might put something here. But the other option is just putting more geometry and bend points, right? So right now, I'm not thinking about too much of animation. What I'm doing is looking at getting the body covered, and then I'll go into, let's grab that. Let's go ahead and lock it. Let's grab this. We'll go into quad draw. I'm going to make sure that in the knees and bend points that I've got some extra stuff. And I'm not going to leave it that way. We will smooth it out. But these areas need to have enough geometry to bend. Your toes, right? Areas like that will all need geometry. So even up here, I'd probably still come in here and say, cool. Now that one, of course, I'm getting a little bit of targeting issues. There's one, there's two, there's three. So you'll see a little bit of tightening up in those areas density-wise, right? Just so they can bend. Now, I had mentioned that this guy, I'm struggling a little bit with what I want to do here because he's got a huge kind of bent over back. And normally, right, so what's happening is this is in a state of expansion and this is in a state of compression. But I don't want to push it too far. And also I need to think about if I am going to animate him or pose him, how am I going to bend him? Because chances are he's not going to be standing straight up to where his back is going to compress all that much. This is mainly his posture. So I'm thinking about movement, and if I add more, I'm really going to kind of over add to the chest, right? It's going to become too dense just to get some stuff here, but I don't really want to add any kind of strange geometry there. So I am pondering making some custom loops for his trapezius. That might help isolate, and that'll allow more of this geometry. I can add a little bit more here, but then also that'll give me more geometry to fill in around without kind of destroying other areas. But mainly what I'm looking for here is smooth, even, uniform topology. Added geometry and bend points, probably put a little bit more to even that out, and I'd probably even put a little bit more here to even that out. But again, always going in and smoothing between those zones. The armpit is another area that is cause for concern. There was a really cool thing that was put up that was, it was a guy, and he was going through setting up Pixar style topology, but he was doing it in Maya. He was kind of building up his base mesh because it was easier to show there. Now, what I do for expansion in the shoulder is this, and some people like it, some people don't. But it's a point here that now the arm can open up and hit a T-pose really quickly. And it starts to set the tone for allowing this armpit area to expand like an accordion. But it also gives me geometry sweeping underneath to hold the rib cage shapes and extend the lats. It's similar to the Pixar layout, but it's a little bit different. The Pixar layout's going to bring the geometry up, and I might have to adhere to that based on the style of this character. But their shoulder geometry will come up and then go straight down the back. So it's almost like it's coming up, looping around the shoulder, and then coming down. But, you know, not quite sure where that's going to go. But you don't see just weird junctions anywhere, right? You see, this is the tone I'm going for. This is where I'm going to end up density throughout the model. So you can see you need more geometry in his arms. And then, of course, I got to figure that out. Does anybody have any questions about this topology or any other things? Because I know when and if this gets rigged, not if, it is going to be rigged because I do want to pose him, at least pose him, but I don't know if anybody's going to want to animate him. But at that point, chances are when he does get rigged, he's going to be twice as much topology, you know. A lot of times this is I'm building the base mesh. When he gets actually rigged, it's all going to look like this, if not a little bit heavier. So sometimes when you're setting up your geometry, the actual rigged geometry is going to look more like, and especially now because we have the capabilities of doing that. Right, so we set up for some things, but then we're going to have a mesh smooth on there. Okay, and you can see that that adds quite a bit, but it also takes care of some things. It gives me some geometry in the areas I might have thought were a little bit too relaxed. It depends on how non-symmetrical it is, because a lot of times you can do the geometry symmetrically, and then when you mirror it over, if it's just like the shoulder's a little bit larger or the eye is positioned differently, you can drag and reposition the geometry for that. If it's completely asymmetrical, then you might do a little bit of cut and paste. So let's say that the character's got a strange eye on one side. It's like a giant ogre eye on one side. I don't know if there's a difference between an ogre eye and a human eye. They have a giant ogre eye on one side and a small eye on the other. Well, I would approach every piece that is symmetrical that way. And then when it's ready to patch in the eye, I would gut the geometry of the original eye that has been duplicated over and then start looping around and then piecing those two structures together. Right. But in some cases, you know, my buddy and classmate, Jeff Uné, when he was working on Avatar, one of the problems is most models at that point, for simplicity's sake, they were symmetrical. And he said, you know, during one of the meetings, because he was the facial team lead on Avatar, he said, look, if we want to really show these as avatars, if you want this avatar creature to be a version of this character, I need to bring in all the asymmetrical needs into the face. So the way his nose wrinkles left and right, the bunny lines is what they're called, I'm going to have to put in geometry to hold those shapes independently left and right. And because he'd proven himself and they knew, all right, he's a facial team lead for a reason, then, okay, do what you need to do. We want this to be a movie that sets the bar and really a game changer. That is almost like Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was a game changer. Avatar was a game changer. We saw a big, huge leap at that point. They did it. So it's really kind of seeing what the needs are. And sometimes you got to do it by hand, you know, but take care of what you can symmetrically, do the other stuff as they need to be done. Okay. All right. So let's look at hair. So I got another question about hair, and it was, the hair's really big. Where did that go? There it is. And thank you for sending me the file again. I'm gonna say this is looking real nice. Also, hands are a little small. Oh, look at that. We got some rust in there for the hair. Very cool. Look at the hands and see. You'd be surprised much, right? Just the line work on a structure. And actually the arms are too small. That could be the way it's drawn, and sometimes you got to stick with that. But, you know, if you go to the outside of the pixelated drawn line or the inside, it can really make or break the volume, so, or the scale. All right, so the question was, how do we approach this hair? I like that there's reference there, and I'm familiar with this character. This character has crazy large hair. There we go, right? Really big. But what's really nice about this large volume of hair, and I'm going to go through multiple ways of creating the hair, multiple things to look at. But what's nice is going about it the right way. Okay, you're already going in and you're starting to generate large pieces. Now we can start duplicating those pieces. We can start drawing new ones. But this is really nice because it's all sectioned, right? It's all this sectioned hair. So I would do multiple pieces and keep them separate pieces. You could connect them, but I think for this, the way it's drawn and the way it's going to look, I think separate pieces will be the way to go. And there is another one. I don't think I have it. But when we get into hair like this and people want to sculpt it all out of one giant chunk, you really have to work the direction and flow of the hair. I think what happens when people get into large volumes and chunks is they just start pulling shapes out, but then they don't blend them, kind of like the wrinkles. They don't blend it back into the head. So we'll look at this in two different ways. I'll just hack and slash at Dynamesh and talk about some things, and then we'll continue with the way that's already been started here, which is parts and pieces. So most of the hairstyles that you're going to see are going to fall into three categories of creation methods. And as always, get out there and look at stuff. Look at stuff because there's a ton of reference out there that will give you a bunch of information. Okay, so this is cards made in Maya. Very easy to do, just extruded planes. Once you get a piece, you start duplicating and replicating. So you're going to see card systems, or parts and pieces, right? You're going to see sculpture, and sculpture is going to be more like this. This is sculpted hair, okay? So let's see, this is card systems. You'll see card systems, a lot of just bent cards. Parts and pieces is more like what you would see here, right? Here we're using, it's kind of like a card system and basically is a card system, but they're long flowing pieces. You might generate the ponytail and then the pulled back hair, right? You're working in pieces rather than just straight up sculpture. I mean, card system is pretty, it's more of a game style technique. It does work nice for characters if done right. But this here, again, even though they're just chunky cards, they sell well because the artist is paying attention to flow and direction and clumping of the hair. For us, though, we're not going to be getting into generating the alpha channels and things like that to make the card system really sell. But if you spend time and you shape each card and you position them, it's going to look nice, right? Here again, some parts and pieces, strips being used. Sculpture. Sculpture, the problem with sculpture is a straight sculpture, right? I want to make that clear. Straight sculpture is that it's going to take a ton of geometry to get nice contrast in your shapes, right? Sculpture is great for establishing volumes and generating the base look of the hair. But when you get into really selling the clumping and the direction and in some cases strands, looking at this one, it takes a lot of geometry and a lot of work. But if these were separate pieces like this, those separate pieces instantly give you contrast. So it really depends on which way you want to go. Sometimes it'll be a combination. So what I usually point out on this guy is I love the top of the hair, but the side, I would have rather seen that done sculpturally. I think it would have looked better. Right, here's some mixture of parts and pieces, right? So we've got these parts and pieces as well as some smaller pieces, and then the larger pieces have been sculpted on to sell some of the shapes. But you got to look at stuff. You got to look at stuff and ask yourself, how did they make that? What do I know as a method to make that hair? How can I generate these? And we'll look at some of that today. Right? This isn't a finished product, but I like the way that they're starting out in a very rigid, structural type shape. Right here again, card systems, but looks good. It looks good, even though, you know, looks like stuff taped onto the face, but it still has a feel of hair about it. This is usually what happens when people get into sculpture. Again, it looks like melted ice cream a little bit. Still decent shapes, but again, it lacks that refined look. Here's parts and pieces. Looks really nice. These are kind of like card systems, but a little bit pointier. Ton of information out there. We've gathered some of this for you. Again, strips. I think what usually gets people, because when you look at this, right, whether you're in Maya or ZBrush, let's say you don't know how to do this in ZBrush, you know how to do it in Maya, right? It's just extruded planes. I think what really gets people is the time it takes to make it look natural and refined. That's where the teeth is. The modeling stuff, we know modeling tools. We know how to go about stuff and get it done, but it's that time it takes to make it look right. This is where you sit, you duplicate a piece, you move the verts, you scale it, you rotate it, you duplicate again, you move the verts, you scale it, you rotate it, and you move through the asset that way, and it does take time. Here's some more simple hair. Now, I just want everybody to understand that we're not going to be relying on coloring to show change in highlight and shadow. You see the highlight and shadow here? I would want to see that sculpted into the hair pieces. Okay, this one's interesting. I mean, it's not done, but it just shows, right? You type in 3D modeled hair modeled in ZBrush, And right there, what are they using? Z-spheres. We all know how to use Z-spheres. So they're using Z-spheres to lay out the hair, get their pieces, and then they would continue to sculpt on those. Right? This one's really nice. It is sculpted. What would have made it better, right? Always be objective when you're looking at reference online. If it were me, I would have sculpted it like this, and then I would have broken apart some of the pieces, right? Maybe found where the clumps are, where they're trying to sculpt those in. Maybe break apart that into 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 pieces and let those work together. Could have broken up some of these so it didn't feel so, just soft at the ends. Or maybe using a combination, again, of sculpture and extra pieces to sell. Here's another one using Z-spheres. So there's a ton of stuff out there to go through that. So let's talk about some of the techniques we saw there, and I'll use this as well. How many layers we need for the hair if it's not a sculpting one? As long as it looks right, right? And that's a great question. Do we have to layer it and actually add all the volume? No, not at all. You need to sell the illusion that there is depth there. Now, can you rig that and make it? No, that's good. It's going to be kind of one of those hairs that only the ends move. But other than that, it is a very, just a smoke and mirrors type operation. Okay, so just trying to sell. We don't want to be able to see through, but we want to be able to make it look like there's volume. Let me I'll show you an example. Hold on, there we go. Okay. Okay, so we have this hair here. Right, it's just one layer down to the head. And some of these are actually little stand-ins. They don't even go all the way. All right, you see that? It's just a little filler. But as we go around to the back of the head to sell the layering, there are 4 layers underneath. Again, not full pieces, but it gives a little sense of some layering going on. Make sense? These were generated using NURBS curves. I drew a profile curve and then a path and then extruded it. And then I started just duplicating and shaping as I went through. I'm utilizing groups so I can do 1/2. This may have, let's throw a number out there. This took 4 hours to do. Within 30 minutes, though, I can duplicate and reshape. And now I've got the whole other side. So I will say that hair is one of those things that you're going to feel like you're not getting anywhere for a long time. And then as you start replicating and kind of working like you would production wise, duplicating, mirroring, you'll start noticing that things begin to happen faster per se. Okay. Sorry, we got somebody on I don't know if you guys can hear, but we're talking to the people we're going to be visiting, and the grandma doesn't hear all that well, so there's some shouting in the background there. All right, so again, come on, why is this? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to look at just the head. and the hair pieces. Oh, we got a bunch of pieces there. Cool, 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 cool. Let's go into here. I think some of these are hidden. That's the head. Or is this full body? Let me get to know the scene here a little bit more. Okay, so I think that's the head. We're building from there. All right, so yes, the hair and the character, again, you'll see that addressed minus the hair. So based on the assets I had readily available to me when I made that video, my character, it's the Monsters University character, he doesn't have hair. So I used that one that we just looked at as my hair scene. So it was modeled in Maya, but it ended up moving from its modeling scene into its submission scene. Okay, so what you're going to be doing is as you're exporting your character, the hair's going to be there. If your character has hair, you're modeling hair for it, it's going to go out with the character with everything else. So that will be then imported into a Maya scene file. That scene file, it is a template we supply to you on FSO. It's right in the week 4 deliverables, and you can pull that scene file and start populating it. Okay. Yeah, this one's a popular one. It is a popular one, and I think a lot of people, they do start to panic when they get to the hair because it is so crazy. But so first, let's talk about how it's being modeled now and where it needs to go. You know, looking at the hair, it looks like we've got large pieces and chunks. I have to see what is hair and what is not. I'm going to try and make sure everything is there. Looks like there's some stuff growing. We got some larger pieces. Let me see what's there. And I'm going to hide some of the other stuff because we don't need it per se. I like the way the little gems and stuff were done. A lot of cool stuff going on here. Okay. So right out of the gate, we're going with, I think, curved tubes, I think is the way this is being created. Okay, so the hair breakdown is going to help because you're going to see where you need pieces and where you don't need pieces. 1, 2, right? It'll tell you how many pieces you need. And I would follow exactly what you're seeing. Okay, so now I love that you've got some real world reference in there. That's going to help when you're sculpting. Good thing is for line work, this does give us quite a bit of structural information. So let's look at this big piece here. I think what's happening now is we're getting away from, we're going a little bit too many pieces compared. Let me look at, where's that other image I just saw whip past me? There it is. Right, and I think we can achieve more with some larger volumes and then adding detail to those volumes. So as you're creating volumetric elements and you're not quite sure where you want to go with it, I'm going to go ahead and take this one and I'm going to start shaping this to the head. And if anybody's wondering how did they even make those, I believe it was curved tubes. And I would probably, yeah, I don't think I would use symmetry on this, but oh, this has subdivisions. Okay, if your character has subdivisions on it and you don't want to get rid of those subdivisions, what you can do is insert just a default. I kind of loosely talked about this. You can insert a default sphere Just scale it down and pack it somewhere into the body. And that becomes your reference point. Okay, so when you're looking at this, the body needs to have its subdivisions. Let's say we don't want to get rid of those yet. Then this becomes our reference point. So we would put for curve usage or name it something like that. So now when we go in and we switch to the curve tube, I can still draw on this and it's going to give me that curve tube. Okay. And then I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, and I want to move this to where it needs to go because we're going to try and create that large piece of hair right there. I'm not 100% sure how or where this is kind of working. Sometimes you got to get some information out there before you can correct. Okay. Now we'll also notice that this flares and tapers. So I'm going to go to stroke, and I haven't set this piece yet. I'm going to go to stroke, curve modifiers, make sure size is turned on, and then go to this graph. We're going to say we want you to be large on the bottom and then taper at the tip. And let's click on it and see what happens. Okay, so now we get that kind of tapered look. If we are going to build more volume, if we're going to combine pieces, Dynamesh might be an option. Just because we use non-Dynamesh geometry doesn't mean that we're stuck with that, right? And now you can see that that's its own piece, and we can continue to work with it. We might just opt for subdivisions, right? I can subdivide this and then start pushing and pulling to get more of the shapes we need. But let's go ahead and get into these here. Now, since there's already stuff there, I'm going to work with what's here. But if not, if you're like, hey, I'm not really in love with it, don't be afraid to change, right? Don't be afraid to redo. Again, these tools are nice to the point where we can do that. Get off of there. What are you doing there? Let's see if we maybe move topological is going to give us. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to let's pull that up. Ooh, something's going on there. What do we got going on there? Interesting. Okay. We'll address that if that becomes a problem. I don't know what that was, but. And then we're going to go into inflate. Kind of inflate that, smooth it. Switching back to move. And of course, we have to kind of figure out how this is going to be coming out of this hair. Always like that little bit of a whipping end. Switching to my inflate brush again. So first pass, what are we looking to do? We're looking to complete. Get everything there. Okay, we're going to move to this one. Move. Now, let's say we don't, let's skip, I want to switch gears here, right? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this one. Okay, there it is. Let's duplicate it. Now, it's not just about duplicating. It's about duplicating and making adjustments. And I wouldn't just do regular. I'm going to go in there and everything. I'm going to inflate it a little bit differently. And I think what really makes hair look cool is how it sweeps and bends and curves, right? It's just, if you don't pay attention to your arcs and stuff like that, I'm going to switch to this one and shape it a little bit more. All right, we definitely don't want it to, replicate too much. Okay. Now, one of the things also to think about, if you're going to go the duplication method and you start just duplicating and moving stuff around, one of the things we need to think about is, are we duplicating a shape that's far enough to where duplication makes sense? Or am I creating a harder job for myself that now I duplicated, now I got to go through and make more shape on everything. I got to go through piece at a time. So what I mean by that is, this hair isn't just tubes, right? It's not just tubes. It probably has some structural element to it. So this is where something like Trim Dynamic works really nice. Damien Standard is going to work really nice. But you can go in and you can say, let's flatten this up a little bit. Let's add a little bit more shape to it. Now there's not enough geometry there, so we're going to need to start subdividing these. Lazy mouse is going to be your friend. Because I'm not using lazy mouse and it shows. Right, but now we start getting something that we can begin to work with, and then duplicating that is going to be way more effective, because otherwise we're going to duplicate all these horn styled shapes and it's going to look like that. It's going to look like just horn styled shapes. And this is where your real world reference comes in, because you're going to be able to see how hair like this might form, if anybody actually has hair like this. But there's probably been a wig that's been made. Okay, and then now we start getting stuff like that. We always need to make sure we're moving back to reference. And it's not just this, right? The evolution of hair, some of the things we can get into. I know the Damien Standards mentioned a lot. We can use this to start, all right, just like we did with the lips. Let me make sure if we got a little bit of lazy mouse on there. Let's bring lazy mouse up a little bit. But if I hold Option, it'll invert. We can use it to push in a little bit. And then we can start working and developing those shapes. Now, as far as geometry goes, you're going to run into some issues, some things that aren't going to flow nicely together. But you can see in the mid-range, we start to be able to add in some shapes, some features. All right, you can see there, trying to pay attention to how it's laying, how it might be clumped. I don't get into that because then I get a whole bunch of last minute. I don't know how to, I would, for most, you're going to go into just using what's there because all the brushes are from that. But I'm telling you, just do a simple little, you know, I hate to say it, but get onto YouTube and say how to make your own custom hair brushes in ZBrush, or even Google. I don't want you using anyone else's. I am glad that you brought that up. I don't want you using pre-made brushes from another artist. That becomes a little bit of an issue. But, you know, again, in the nature of keeping it simple, we kind of keep following that. Now, as far as doing this, if I add another layer of shape onto this structure, I am going to create the possibility of more replication. So you will need to do some sculptural elements if you choose sculpture, or even parts and pieces inside of ZBrush. If you do choose that pathway, you're going to have to sculpt and change the pieces independently of each other. Otherwise, you will notice that. I'm not looking for you to scratch in or rake in a whole bunch of hair strands or anything like that. I'm really looking for nice, strong forms, clumping, recognition of the clumping, the direction of the hair and stuff like that. So, you know, but right here, there's not a lot in there that I can't quickly sculpt out, but now I can start duplicating it. And you'll see that this being duplicated will look a lot better than just having a bunch of these. And our scene is going to get crazy heavy, but sometimes it is what it is, and you have to do what you got to do. And you can even play with some of those lines, and you can see where the hair is growing and flowing, and that'll help you change some of the shape. So you get more of that layered piece. Oh, nice. Awesome. And that's what friends are for. That is awesome. Because some people may just not find that search. They may not find the same thing, or maybe they did, and it just helps them recognize that, okay, cool, I got the right thing. Okay. Now, if you want to work in a little bit more of a clumpy way, you could use parts and pieces and then dynamesh those together if needed. But I would, you know, I think for this character's hair, this is a good way to go as long as you are sculpting and shaping beyond just tubes. We don't want to see just tubes. But follow the hair and use your real reference to see how the shapes would be on those pieces. But the reference is there to show you the shape that you're shooting for. The real world reference helps you with the smaller details that aren't included in your character's reference. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So this is where I would go with this one, but I'm going to show you a couple more methods that we can use to get started, just things that people might not look at or get into. If I was going to do any kind of card system, I mean, for where you're at, I'd probably utilize Maya for that. I just think it's a little bit easier to duplicate and get to the verts. But if you're more familiar with managing multiple pieces in ZBrush, ZBrush is great. You can create a simple plane and just start planting those. You can even look at creating your own IMM brushes, insert mesh brush or insert multiple mesh brush if you have multiple ones. But, you know, for the most part, with the aim, what was that? Oh, was that supposed to go to somewhere else? With the aim? All right, cool. So let's look at some other ways of generating pieces, because you can generate chunkier pieces. Let's say you're going for something that's a little bit more rectangular. Maybe you don't want circular or cylindrical shaped options here. What we can do, again, we got to find there's our piece there. And I'm going to use the curved strap to create something similar. Oh my goodness, that turned into a nightmare. It's let me see if I can get it. Okay, let's separate that and do default again. Let's turn off snap. Are you snapping out there? You shouldn't be snapping, but that's okay. We'll work with it. I'll go and lock the start end so I can pull that a little bit more. But how do we get more blocky style out of this? It's the same thing. We're going to go ahead and Z intensity sets our thickness. You see how it's getting a little thicker there? So I just pick a nice square shape. Draw size is going to be the width. Okay, so you find the size that you want. You set the thickness that you want. And then you adjust your curve modifiers, size, and you say, let's go ahead and you can still adjust thickness, but maybe you want to start with a little bit more yes. That might be, I'll have to look at that. If you want to send me your file, I can take a look at what's going on there. One of the reasons that people don't do some of that stuff is it does wipe out UVs in certain instances. But I think if your UVs are there and they're on each piece, you should be able to export the UVs from ZBrush so you're not losing them. But if they're coming out as an OBJ, how are you taking them out of, I mean, as an OBJ and then right into Maya? Yeah, send me your file and I'll try and take a look at it over the weekend here. So now you can see for something like this, if I wanted to create I can start dropping in some shapes and then start working with them. So when you look at characters like, I think she's towards the bottom, you might have a better idea of how this was created. Squarish little pieces, rounded off, so we might have to add a little bit more, subdivide them, and then smooth them. Okay. And then the other way that people get into is going to be just straight up sculpture. So that's what we're going to move into. And I'm going to grab the whole body here. Okay, so here's what we got. And this is a lot of people like to do this. The only recommendation I would have is that you don't just go one piece is everything, kind of change it up a little bit. I'm trying to see if I've got a scene file that I can bring up that a student was working with last month, and we're struggling with the hair structures and some of the things we looked at to get that going. But let me see what I can do. After I show you how to get started this way, I'll show you how we can advance. So I'm going to go with the sphere. And I think a lot of people go with this because they go, ooh, simple. I don't have to worry about doing much of anything technically. I can just take this sphere and work with it. And it ends up just not working out all that well. Okay, but if you do want to start with this, you want to start structuring elements this way. What you're going to do is set a sphere in there, grab your move brush, symmetry's on. And even for large volumes, right, we'll still use some of the reference here, and we'll show you how we can start generating large volumes with this. Okay, now her hair's off to the side, and it looks like her reference isn't lined up. So I'm going to follow as best as I can. But first thing we want to do is switch. We can't use don't use subdivisions here. I see this a lot, and people are just yanking topology. You can see the torn faces. If you're going to start this way, Dynamesh would almost be a necessity to get going. And pick whatever resolution is going to work for the asset that you've got. Okay, because now we can get in here and say, cool, let's start pooling. And I'll probably go to the rough section. Perfect, look at that. Looks beautiful. And she does have a side shot that would show exactly where those things are going. And then updating Dynamesh. And I think her hair goes down pretty far. And she's wearing a helmet that's kind of holding some stuff, but we'll go with that, right? So even if you started something like this, and you were going to go more sculpturally with it, we can come in here. We're using Dynamesh, so we don't have any subdivisions. My brush is too big. All right, now I'm going to go symmetrically. If you're not going to go symmetrically, then you don't have to, but You got to kind of get a feel for how these things manipulate. All right, so maybe we just use the volume, right, with Dynamesh, and we can put some pieces in. And then what I got to do is update our Dynamesh, and you can see that it gives us a lot of that. Now it needs to be sculpted, so you're going to switch back into something like your curve, and you're going to start working at how do we build that in and blend it. And if you get some weirdness, which you're going to get, you're going to Dynamesh that out. Okay, now I know that piece isn't there. We're going to play pretend a little bit. But you can see how I start to get volume. Now, you could sculpt all this too. Snake hook is okay. The problem, though, is what people will fail to do when they do this is you'll kind of notice what I'm doing here, and I'm not really following the reference at this point, but you see I'm trying to work the volumes into each other. So first pass, again, establishing that structure. Second pass, we're going to go in, we're going to need a little bit more geometry because now we get into things like refinement and making sure that the hair reads well. So I'm going to come through here and I'm going to kind of hold Alt and I'm going to pull that and blend it into the hair. Blend it in. I'm going to take Alt off and I'm going to cut up into. I'm going to start cutting down into there and really pushing. And this resolution may not be enough. Right? I'm redefining life. Now I'm redefining how the hair is working with the structure. I'm not just putting it in there and letting randomness take over. We're going in and we're trying to define how it's being overlapped and how it's working. Okay, very, very important. Give me a second. I'm going to try and bring up this one that goes down this sculptural path, but then kind of runs into a little bit of problem. Not there. Although it is nice to look at that again. Let's see. 3CPR, Dynamesh Pirate. I don't think that's it. Character 02. This might be it. Well, it's just going to be one way, right? Otherwise, it is way too much work. That'll be ridiculous to try and get done. One of the things here is that you're looking at the hair and then you're trying to decide what might be the best way. So if I had short, choppy hair, I'm going to choose sculpture or cards. If I have long flowing hair, I might do sculpture / curved tubes. If it's a flatter long hair, I might use strips, right? So it's part of the grade there is technically looking at what you chose and did that work best for the hairstyle. Any of the hairstyle, any of the modeling methods work. It's just they do tend to work better for certain types of hair, and it's a little bit more work for other types. But pick one and run with that. And I would tell everybody, get online and look and see, can you find something that was modeled like the hairstyle you're trying to create, and how did they model it? I'm going to look at, we're going to be done with this one. I'm going to bring up a couple things here. Just give me a second. I'm going to see if I can't find this one. Dyno, character, dyno, belt weave, week 3 model, knife. Perfect. This is it. Okay. So we're going to take a look at the hair here. I'll go back to what we can see. This character. I know a couple people are doing this character. Okay. And he's got the large flowing locks of hair. Very sculptural, right? They approached it sculpturally and then started dynameshing, and dynameshing broke apart. Why did dynamesh break apart? Do we have enough geometry to start achieving what it is we're trying to create? The answer is no. This is a large volume of hair and it's not working. It looks chunky. It doesn't have the right flow. We're losing all of these sections. And you can see in this hair, it's drawn pretty nicely. I mean, it's kind of giving all the sections. They wanted to go sculptural with it. So unfortunately, we're going to, I said, okay, I'll show you what you can do sculpturally. So now they are using a background image that I'm not a fan of. It's an image plane instead of locking up your reference. So it really kind of makes viewing the reference a little bit harder, but I can still see enough up here. And where do we go from here? The first thing is again, knowing your volumes and your shapes. So this with the characters back and everything, if I bring that in, right, we want to fit this a little bit more. So always making sure we have a good structural element. So if it's on the head, we're going to want to drape it a little bit more on the neck there, bring it out over the back. Let's go ahead and bring it a little bit closer to the back. Maybe add a little bit of relaxing there. We also want to account for the skull. Okay. So structural is always going to be the name of the game. And you can still see kind of some of those forms. Okay. And then once you get that, it's going to be working this mass, right? And this is what happens if people start pulling and yanking, they just get randomness. And it, you know, like this piece here, how is it sticking out? Where is its layer? How is it working with the surfaces and the stuff underneath? So that's kind of what we're looking at. Where do we go from this point? So I'm going to start smoothing a little bit, and I'm going to update my Dynamesh. I think this is Dynamesh. Definitely should be Dynamesh. I think Dynamesh is not on. Let's turn Dynamesh on. Okay. And as we smooth through, I don't want to smooth everything, because if I smooth everything, I'm going to lose my details there. Symmetry, we probably don't need symmetry. Unfortunately, this style hair. Why does zebra sometimes go gray in the background? Is there a way to stop that? Not really, just kind of move your camera a little bit. You talk about the little squares. I mean, if you're using a Mac, Macs aren't really designed for what we do. So does it go gray and you don't see anything? Oh, yeah, I mean, you should be able to go right, you know, kind of push it to where that's not happening. Now, snake hook. Everyone loves the snake hook. I'm not really a fan. I'm going to try and use it now here. I'm going to see what we can do there, because he's got this little kind of whip up. What I do, right, all the demonstrations I've seen with the snake hook, what I do like about it is it does give you the ability to kind of go wee, and you can zigzag hair as you go. And I know sound effects always make the demonstration. But at this resolution, all I can do is really kind of push the shapes and work with what's kind of being delivered. Like this piece here, where does it come from? Let's try and figure that out. This one here, same thing. Let's try and start establishing that. This piece here is kind of broken. We're gonna maybe pull that into this. A little bit of smoothing. A little bit of smoothing. And anything like this, I want to get rid of. I don't need anything like that. I don't need it, I tell you. There we go. Right, because this hair is, it's being pulled back from somewhere. And you see, if you don't like the line, undo it. But once we start developing some direction and we start bringing back some form to it, it gives us stuff to latch onto. And then when we up-res, we know how and where we should be shaping this stuff. And you see I'm updating a lot, trying to make more sense. This is like, I say it all the time, cake, right? Always cake. You can have the prettiest cake, you bite into it, it tastes like garbage. It's really about that structure. When you start to refine details, if that's the icing. And it's always going to look better if you have nice structural elements, and then it's going to make the icing easier to apply. Same thing here. If you have strong structural elements, adding details and working with that will make more sense. And even as we get in here, we can't see, right? I can kind of see there is some information there, but I can't see all of it. So I need to establish some more of that a little bit better. And even if we smooth it out, we will see a little bit more of that coming through. Update Dynamesh. I'm going to go ahead and carve around that one. You can see Dynamesh starting to give us a problem, just the resolution that we're at. Trying to identify that overlap there. Okay, now it's becoming more readable. So how do we add a little bit more to something like this? This will be the last thing we cover. You can watch the other video. It talks about some hair stuff. But right here, you see how there's some extra pieces. It's okay to mix and match. It's okay to break apart. You might sculpt and then choose to separate and make new pieces out of it. Remember the technique: mask, extract, Z-remesh, and shape, right? We did that for clothing items. It works the same for pulling chunks of hair and establishing those pieces. But one of the things that I think also works is if we wanted to add like this little rip in the hair right up through here. One, we're going to need more geometry in this. Okay, but this was a cool thing I saw not long time ago, but and this will go through that masking and extracting. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to hold Control. And I'm going to go up through there. We're going to go into Subtool, Extract. Double's not going to be too bad here. Let's see what it looks like, how big it is. That's too big. Let's try 0.01. Okay, I'm going to change it quite a bit anyway. Let's hit accept. It's going to give us that new piece. Okay. Let's bring back the hair. So now we've got something here. That first thing I'm going to do is start shaping. I always like to smooth them out. Okay, once you get something that's a little bit more to what you need or would like, Z-remesh it. So Shift F so we can see the geometry. Because remember, it's coming from a mess and we need something that's going to work a little better. We already kind of have the shape that we want, not shaped per se, but we've got the, tapering and all that stuff happening. It doesn't need to be 5,000 polygons. Let's just go ahead and Z-remesh that. Okay. And you can get into curling, right? There's a lot of things you can do here with the tools. Shaping, this is where some people do like that snake hook. Right. You really gotta pull these things different ways to get the look you want. If you're like, man, this takes forever, yes, you are correct. Okay, but I can take something like this and work that in and add a whole nother layer of depth and get some of that contrast in so it doesn't feel just like a straight sculpture. And this can be subdivided. It can be, you know, whatever we want. So he's got a nice worm coming out of his head. Add a subdivision to it. That way now we can grab something like Damien Standard and right. Now the resolutions do need to match, otherwise it's not going to look right. But what you'll tend to notice when people are working straight sculpture, it always looks muddy. It always looks soft, and they lack those sharp tips and points on the hair. But throwing in some of this stuff will add some breaks. I can pull this different from the silhouette. You can see that we can see through from certain angles, and it may not be, you know, it was just a quick little demo thing there. But again, you throw those in here and there, overlapping. Again, it gives you more life, more chaos, a little bit of break in that silhouette. And we'll see that true when we look at, you know, this one here. You see these pieces overlaid on that larger piece. That's to help break up that silhouette. We'll see it in a lot of other ones. Like even this one here, breaking away from the silhouette, whipping those ends out a little bit nicer, separating them really works out. Even this one here, we got that large structure with the strips being used. That almost feels unfinished, though. It's a little too faceted. Might just be a stand-in. I don't know. But otherwise, it's going to feel like, you know, Gandalf, where he's got like these lumpy ends to his hair, and that's really not what we're going to see. Or we're going to see like this, where it just doesn't, it just, again, feels like melted ice cream. Really not pulling that strong end to really get that nice silhouette. Okay, so again, there's a lot of different ways to approach these things. Maya, we know how to work with Maya. You did some NURB stuff. Maya is great. I don't think many people get into Maya, though. They tend to push ZBrush more because that's what you're learning and it's exciting. Look at our Pinterest board for hair. There's some good information in there. If you're getting into something like a braid or ponytails, just make sure that you are not overusing one piece. Again, I see it all the time, and it just, I'm sure you're struggling. If you're using just one piece, and you might be struggling with trying to get the shapes you want. Long hair, pulled back ponytails, those are awesome because you have separate pieces for the bangs, separate pieces for the pulled back look, separate pieces for the ponytail, and you can manage those all independently of each other. And that's really what makes those hairstyles cool and fun to create. But think about your process. Think about everything we've learned, all the tools and procedures, and put that into play. Hopefully you've got your resurfacing UVs, normal maps done. You've modeled your ear. So now we get into, let's spend the weekend doing hair, next couple days doing hair, because it takes a little bit to figure out. Same takes, yeah, I mean, eyebrows depends. I mean, you're going to be getting most of your hero style stuff is going to have X-Gen. You're going to get into hair systems for all that stuff. Fiber mesh. We don't get into that because for a lot of you, it's your first time in ZBrush. So we want to learn how to create shapes in ZBrush, you know, fiber mesh, hair. There's a reason people specialize in that. Yes, we should all know how to do it, but again, there's so many different hairstyles. If we got into that, it'd be a nightmare, especially with only the weekend left to get things figured out. So yes, for eyebrows, you can do a simple mask extract and then do some shaping on it. You can do eyebrows with card systems. You can do beards with card systems or sculpt. Like all these techniques do work for any hair. It's just kind of figuring out how to make it look right. Some of them look right out of the gate. Some of them you really got to kind of push. All right. So I think that's going to conclude this broadcast day. Unless, you know, as I'm finishing up, if anybody has any last minute stuff that they want to get into or talk about really quickly. We did go over, I told you I would anyway because of the interruption earlier, so I'm glad we were able to do that. Don't forget to watch the video for getting your assets ready for submission. If you have any questions, please email me. You know, again, it is the weekend. I will be traveling. I will do my best to get to my emails promptly through that time. And then we will go from there. But anybody have any last questions? Any last things to talk about? Any last questions for the submission? Okay. Well, you guys have been great. A lot of good participation, a lot of great questions. Thank you for sending me the work. I love using student work to show and talk about things. Again, I think it makes that connection a little bit better. So thank you for that. Please do not be fearful of having your work looked at. We're all here to get better. And if anybody makes fun of somebody for trying to get better, boom, we kick them out of here. We don't have time for that, right? But yes, if you guys have any questions in the future, please do not hesitate to email me. I love looking at animations. I know a little bit about rigging, not a lot of the high end stuff, but I can rig enough to make stuff move. You know, but sometimes just having a fresh set of eyes on something works. But you know, please contact me in the future if you have anything that you need help with. That also helps me stay fresh with skills and stuff, because you all come up with some interesting things. You're trying to do something that has never been done before, and it's fun to figure that out, right? So cool. Well, have fun, get it done. Let me know if you need anything in the future. Stay safe and healthy. Yeah, critical is the way to go. We don't have time to sugarcoat things. And, you know, so I'm glad you like that. You got to stay positive. You got to have fun doing what you're doing. Right. So definitely thank you for, again, all the emails and the communication and the back and forth during the lectures. I love that stuff. Yeah. Happy 4th to everybody. Good luck with the last little bits of your stuff. Man, I could say goodbye forever, but you know, there's only so much time. But yeah, let me know if you need anything. And it's been a pleasure. That concludes this broadcasting. All right, everybody. Take care. Have fun.